As someone who's been deeply invested in visual novels for over 15 years, I've witnessed the ups and downs of various developers in this niche yet passionate industry. Some developers have stood the test of time, while others have faded into obscurity, pivoted to different genres, or have straight up closed. I want to recognize their legacy, their paths forward, if any, and most importantly, which ones specifically appeal to me. In this video, I'll share my personal top 10 favorite visual novel developers as of 2025. Starting off the list at number 10, I have Frontwing. They're an interesting case because, as far as their visual novels go, I've only read a few, specifically parts of the original Grisaya trilogy, Lilianotsuka Painting Lies, and Perennial Dusk Kinsenka. There are others that seem interesting, but I've mostly experienced them secondhand by watching online friends stream Island, Hatsumira, and Ginka. I've also just seen the anime adaptations of Achi My Dear Moments and the main stories of Labyrinth and Eden of Grisaya. This means relatively limited first-hand experience with Frontwing's titles despite their very large catalog, but even I have to admit, despite most people knowing them for Grisaya, they have more legit variety than you'd expect. That said, there is a reason why Grisaya is so popular and their flagship series. It has a solid mix of goofy, over-the-top comedy while also getting surprisingly serious with psychological drama in the Fruit of Grisaya, which is generally considered easily the best part of the series. A very underrated Frontwing title I've read, Lilianotsuka Painting Lies, was written by the same person behind Euphoria from Clock Up. Despite being an all-ages Yuri-focused romance, it has surprisingly deep emotional weight and features one of my favorite lesbian couples in terms of pure character dynamics and interactions. One of Frontwing's newer titles that interested me most recently is Perennial Dusk Kinsenka, a title from the writer who did favorites is Iro Toridori no Sekai and Hikari, two titles that had some of my favorite emotional moments and heroines in visual novels. As of the recording of this video, I am currently in the middle of reading Perennial Dusk, and it certainly grabbed me early on with its unique premise of having a serial killer main character attempt to kill a man by getting him run over by a car, only to find a reason to live by falling in love with a girl with multiple personalities, alongside a lot of interesting world building around an alternate Twilight world. I will definitely be making a video review of Kinsenka if I haven't already uploaded it by the time you are watching this video. For the series I haven't personally read firsthand, Grisaya Phantom Trigger seems to be a personal action war series, Hatsumira and Isekai with an amusing mix of animal monster girls, politics and romance, Achi and Ginka with down-to-earth emotional romances with unique settings, and Island with blending supernatural mystery with emotional drama. They even have a subset of surprisingly popular Moege and Nukige like the Yukikoi Melt and Loca Love series. Even though I haven't personally read most of their games, I respect Frontwing for their variety. A small X factor for this ranking is that their Western branch has helped translate big titles unrelated to Frontwing like Tsubehebe from Keto-Q, the Oppai Academy series from Milk Factory, and the, sadly, forever delayed official translation for Shar no Kuni. At number 9, I have Type Moon, the creators of Fate, Tsukihime, Melty Blood, and Witch on the Holy Night. I have a confession though. In terms of visual novels, I've only read the original Fate Stay Night and Tsukihime. I have not read the Tsukihime remake, Blue Glass Moon, or any fan discs like Kagetsu Toya or Hollow Ataraxia, though I am waiting for the latter's Steam version, and I have not touched Mahoyo yet. Still, the fact that Type Moon is even on this list, despite only reading 2 of their visual novels, should say a lot. Nasu has some of the most consistently great strengths: top-tier magic-setting world building and memorable character drama. Between Tsukihime's 5 routes and Fate Stay Night's 3, there's an insane amount of variance. Shiki, Tono, and Shiro Emiya go through drastically different journeys depending on the route, proving that protagonists can be completely different people across multiple routes instead of being the same boring blank slate like in a lot of story-heavy visual novels. Type Moon also has some of the most iconic heroine designs and character arcs. While I'm not personally super into Arcuid from Tsukihime, I get why she's so beloved. Her journey of becoming more human beyond just being an overpowered vampire is compelling. Saber has a similar arc, with Fate focusing on the consequences of clinging too hard to duty. And those are just the most famous heroines. All 8 across both games go through incredible development. Type Moon stories also translate surprisingly well into anime. Fate Stay Night basically got a different adaptation for each route, with how Ufotable animates the action scenes arguably work better than even in visual novel form. Hopefully that will apply to Mahoyo's adaptation too. Now, why isn't Type Moon higher? Simple. As of this video, I've only read the original Tsukihime and Fate Stay Night, and I haven't really been motivated to explore the sequels or fan discs. Kagetsu Toya seems overly complicated, Hollow Ataraxia is half slice of life comedy and half weird new plot, and Witch on the Holy Night, Mahoyo's main heroine Aoko, seems a little bit too obnoxious for my taste. That said, I love the fighting games based on Tsukihime and Fate, like Melty Blood Type Lumina and Fate Unlimited Codes. They take the characters straight from the visual novels, adapt their powers into a 2D plane, and turn them into something fun, showing just how strong the world building and combat systems are. I've also watched every anime adaptation of both original visual novels, as well as several spin-offs like Fate Zero, Prisma Ilia, and the crossover between the two series, Carnival Phantasm. If, when Hollow Autoroxia and Blue Glass Moon get official Steam releases and I end up loving them, Type Moon could rank higher, but since I'm mostly relying on these ranking based on the two original visual novels and a ton of non-visual novel spin-offs, I can't put them any higher for now. At number 8, I have SMEE, a company that nails what I tend to love in moege, balancing over-the-top comedy with surprisingly wholesome romance and mild character development. At least based on their translated titles, Futuraba, Making Lovers, Sugar Style, and Harem Kingdom, they do this extremely well. For comedy, I love it when VNs go beyond basic anime comedy tropes and make the characters feel like actual people savagely joking with each other. SMEE characters frequently drop dumb, raunchy comments, and the protagonists often go on hilarious, fast-paced rants. Each game by them typically has at least one completely weird heroine as well, which always adds to the fun. But SMEE also delivers on the romance. Whether it's the long common route in Futuraba or the short one in Making Lovers, by the time the couple gets together, their relationship feels genuinely built up. Rina's route in Futuraba sells the friends to lovers dynamic perfectly. Karen's route from Making Lovers shows how two friends forced to live together grow closer, and Harem Kingdom actually explores how to make a polyamory relationship work beyond just being a gimmick. That said, SMEE is inconsistent. Some routes, like Futuraba's Himari, are surprisingly boring despite their potential. Any sister character, like Making Lovers' Akko or the closest thing to a plot twist in Harem Kingdom, often develops into generic incest stories. And Sugar Style is easily their worst translated game in my opinion. Bland heroines, weak comedy, and nothing memorable besides the university setting. Lately, at least from what I hear in research, SMEE seems to be shifting away from their usual style. 1-1 Kadashi Kanojo is less comedy-focused, Haji Love Making Lovers goes back to high school, which ruins what made Making Lovers appealing as an adult romance in the first place, and Love Pickle Poppy has a completely different art style. I'm not sure why they're changing so much, but it's kind of worrying for me. Still, I'm looking forward to future translations since they consistently deliver wholesome romance. And I'm still waiting for that Love Rabel fan translation, which has been stuck in TLC hell for years. At number 7, I have Qruppo. Of all the entries on this list, this is by far the newest and the one with the most potential to move up or down, as their first title, Nukatashi, was released in Japan in 2018. Since then, they've only released 3 visual novels across 2 series, but 2 of them already among my favorite visual novels of all time. So what stands out about Qruppo? Beyond their distinct art style, these developers are creative visionaries, fully aware of common eroge tropes. They craft ridiculously unique settings that work within the eroge space, while maintaining a sense of groundedness with surprisingly deep characters and a darker take on what seem like parody-like settings. The perfect example is Qruppo's Nukatashi series, their first creation. It's set on an island where everyone can supposedly have sex for free in public. Not only is it free of shame or fines, but it's outright encouraged. However, in a dark twist, if you're of age, deemed as looking at least high school aged, which aligns with Japan's legal age of consent, you are forced to participate in it. This mix of a utopia-dystopia centered on constant mandatory sex is the perfect parody of how much visual novels rely on being eroge. Even compared to other story-heavy works, Nukatashi leverages this concept in a hilariously comedic way, but with surprisingly serious, badass action moments. The fact that Nukatashi 1 and 2 alone can rival and honestly surpass the goofy over-the-top parody humor of developers like SMEE and ASa Project, while blending solid character development, dark depth, and plot progression, shows how well Qruppo understands the visual novel eroge medium. They clearly aim to combine the best of all worlds. Henpri, or Hentai Prison, is Qruppo's latest project and is even more highly regarded by fans. The prison-based setting is an odd choice, though hearing it's apparently inspired by The Shawshank Redemption is intriguing. Unfortunately, despite my initial excitement for Henpri, I have not finished it as of this video. I've only completed the common route, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really feeling it. I was told this game would be a more serious take on Nukatashi's formula, but the common route's beginning felt way too repetitive. It focuses on finding ways for the main character Shuichiro to suffer in every arc, with only a few cool moments where he gets to one-up the arc's antagonist. That was nice and all, but the problem is I can't connect with characters who are essentially sex offender criminals. Even though the story is meant to be more serious than Nukatashi, it still carries Qruppo's signature comedy, which would be fine if it matched Nukatashi's humor, but I just don't find it that funny. The comedy feels mismatched in an otherwise dark, serious setting and comes off as repetitive and less impactful. Most importantly for me though, the pacing is painfully slow. One thing I loved about Nukatashi, especially the original, was its surprisingly tight pacing, with each event synced to clear goals from the start. With Hentai Prison, while there are some fun moments in certain arcs, I still have no idea what the overarching goal of the visual novel is. If Hentai Prison had been on the same level as Nugatashi or even a lot closer, Qruppo could have been easily a top 3 favorite developer right now. However, my disappointment with Henpri has brought them down to 7th place, though I still heavily respect Qruppo for being the notable new kid on the block. Despite my issues with Henpri, I love Nugatashi 1 and 2. They are 2 of my favorite visual novels ever and I could easily revisit them. Who knows, maybe when I finish Hentai Prison, I'll like it more once I get through all the routes, but I'm just not feeling it, and I'm honestly worried that due to Hentai Prison's success, future Qruppo titles might lean towards its longer, slower-paced, less funny style. At number 6, I have PULLTOP, which I suppose also includes its sister company, PULLTOP Latte. That said, between the two, I've only read a few of their series, If My Heart Had Wings, A Sky Full of Stars, Koizuru Natsu no Last Resort, and their fan discs. When scenario writer Konoasta is involved, PULLTOP excels at one thing: extreme wholesomeness. As someone who loves the Yashike subgenre of slice-of-life anime, it's been hard to find that same lighthearted, cozy feeling in visual novels while still having character depth. PULLTOP with Konoasta has come closest to fulfilling that for me. They're great at creating down-to-earth settings with unique, memorable club ideas and themes. If My Heart Had Wings features a glider club, A Sky Full of Stars focuses on stargazing, and Koirizo takes place at an island resort under construction where the heroines face their own personal struggles. The writing in all 3 emphasizes a relaxing atmosphere, likable characters, and well-integrated backstories. All 3 series also commit to true heroines. Kotori has great development even in the common route of If My Heart Had Wings, dealing with her disability and her mutual growth with Aoi, the main protagonist, which ties well into the themes of the series. Hikari and Saya play an interesting role in A Sky Full of Stars as a childhood friend love triangle with a well-fleshed-out past. Umi and Koirizo, well, at least she has a unique way of being connected to the protagonist before the story starts. As much as I love these specific wholesome VNs and their fan discs, the main reason I can't rank PULLTOP higher is when Konoasta isn't involved, I lose interest in most of their titles. I have no interest in the Love Kami series. Hakane Aogi Uarashi no is highly rated, but since it only has 4 routes and all involve teacher-student romances, yeah, not my thing. Kokoro at Function seems intriguing with its futuristic VR setting, but it's not even human translated. I'm also not super interested in Konoasa's very short all-ages titles like Adventure of a Lifetime, which has been on my backlog for a long time, or the untranslated Anohi Tabibito Furaru Mirai. If I were just making this ranking just off If My Heart Had Wings, A Sky Full of Stars, and their fan discs, PULLTOP would easily be top 3 potential, but I can't in good conscience place them in the top 5 because of their inconsistent catalog, despite how much I love the hell out of the Konozora and Miyazora series. At number 5, I have Innocent Grey, a developer I've been interested in for a while, mainly for a particular series, the Cartagra and the Kara no Shoujo series. Once Shirobune started their own official translation localized as The Shell, and especially when Kara no Shoujo 3 finally got a translation, I decided to jump in. Innocent Grey has a very distinct art style, surprisingly less anime-like than most, with more realistic character features and the lack of a typical oversized anime eyes. Going back to Cartagra and Kara no Shoujo, it seems like Innocent Grey had a clear vision, setting each game in a winter-themed murder mystery with gruesome murders, but also surprisingly emotional tragedies. I think these elements are executed well across all 4 visual novels. Another aspect I appreciate is the focus on adult age characters throughout these games. Many popular plot-heavy visual novels still primarily feature high school characters, which can feel uncomfortable when adult characters have close, sometimes even romantic relationships with high schoolers. The Cartagra and Kara no Shoujo series are consistently good and interesting, with each entry standing out on its own while fitting into the overall vision. Innocent Grey does have one other series, the Flowers series, a Yuri all-ages visual novel. I tried Flowers Sur Printemps a long time ago, but I got bored. However, that was around a decade ago when the translation was still new. Now that I've read and watched more Yuri series, I might enjoy it if I give it another shot. And the first game isn't as well regarded as its sequels Flowers Sur Ete and Automne, so I have those to look forward to. Innocent Grey may only have a few series under the belt in the roughly 20 years they've been around, but their consistent delivery of good, if not great titles is commendable, especially when other big-name VN developers have churned out at least a few duds. That said, they currently don't have any future announced titles besides the Cartagra Full HD remake translation, so I'm curious where they plan to go from here. At number 4, I have ASa Project. As far as moege companies go, this probably isn't a top contender for most people, but I personally love them despite their strong Achilles heel. The romance is decent at best. Instead, ASa Project goes all in on over-the-top, ridiculous comedy, and that alone makes them stand out from the other comedy-heavy visual novel companies. I noted earlier that I like SMEE's style of savage, over-the-top comedy and Qruppo's goofy jokes in an otherwise dark, serious settings, but even they can be inconsistent with their comedy. ASa Project, however, goes much harder on their comedy, with heroines who are even more savage, raunchy, and hilariously stupid. Their titles are consistently funny to me, and so far, they're one of 2 visual novel developers whose translated titles have consistently made me laugh hard. I read all 3 of their translated titles from Nekonian, and they were all a great time. The humor is just that freaking hilarious. I love how the characters are just so over the top, either completely stupid or savagely roasting each other, breaking away from the usual boring or pandering harem jokes you get in most moge, looking at you, Yuzusoft and Alcott. They also poke fun at settings and situations, like Sankaku Renai's Otaku Club, Koikari's Rent-a-Boyfriend premise, and Renai Royale, where all the heroines openly compete for the MC in a much better way than Aix by Hooksoft did. As mentioned earlier, ASa Project's biggest flaw is that the actual romance writing is decent at best. But that's generally not an issue for me. The comedy alone carries the routes, and there are surprisingly wholesome moments that make the titles worth reading. I don't mind having one moge company that's just purely about the jokes, so the fact that there's any passable romance at all is just a nice cherry on top. So ASa Project is on this list purely because they specialize in one thing, and they do that one thing really well, at least for me. That's enough to put them in my top 5. With Nekonian releasing Futamata Renai soon, and presumably maintaining a good relationship with ASa Project, I look forward to what crazy, wacky romance scenarios, hilarious comedy, and characters they come up with next. At number 3, I have OVERDRIVE, a developer I consider probably the most underrated visual novel developer of all time. If there's one thing OVERDRIVE is known for, it's always trying something new and exciting, never opting for the safe route in romance visual novels. They tell stories rarely seen in the genre, like band dramas, shonen-style tokusatsu, and even a VN catering to Westerners about touring Japan while dating one of 2 sisters. While only a few of their titles are all-time favorites for me, I like almost all of their translated ones due to their unique concepts. I also appreciate their distinctive art style, which they maintained until Musicus. Their goofy, rounded designs might be why OVERDRIVE isn't more popular. Many readers likely prefer more conventionally attractive art in romance VNs, but I think their quirky designs suit their unique storytelling. Their characters are generally relatable and down-to-earth, with occasional silly gimmicks like cross-dressing in Kira Kira and Musicus, or the obnoxiously perverted bro characters in Edelweiss. Despite their varied settings, there's a surprisingly strong emotional core in almost all their titles. Even Edelweiss and Kira Kira have genuinely depressing moments, some surpassing even Keys' visual novels. Mod spoiler, Key isn't on this list by the way. Later titles like Bokuten fully embrace tragedy, and Musicus has a strong theme of how 1 or 2 choices can drastically affect your life emotionally in the long run. OVERDRIVE is admittedly a weird, imperfect company, but they're my weird and imperfect visual novel developer. It's sad that they closed down after such a strong final release with Musicus. If you want more detailed thoughts on their individual titles and why they eventually shut down, I made a Rise and Fall retrospective video on OVERDRIVE. This next entry is the closest I'm going to get to cheating on this list, as at number 2, I have Hawkeye Company Limited. You might not have heard of them as they haven't made a single visual novel under this brand. Instead, it's the parent company of several popular sub-brands including Minato Soft, Minato Carnival, and Mirai. If those names don't ring a bell, I'll just be up front. They produce some of my favorite comedy-focused action rom-com visual novels, including the Majikoi series, the Sujiro series, and the Destiny Star Girlfriend series. All 3 of these companies have only had 1 series translated each, but their comedic styles are so similar that I consider them all part of one company anyway. All these series share a bunch of things in common. Really goofy, over-the-top comedy, usually featuring badass, physically powerful, or capable heroines. While I usually enjoy comedy in media, for visual novels, humor often falls into generic Japanese harem anime humor with generic stereotypes. However, the Minato and Mirai developers consistently make me crack up while keeping the characters genuine and unique with solid character development and stories. The first visual novel I encountered from the Minato Mirai developers was Majikoi, my personal all-time favorite visual novel. In addition to its great comedy, it features amazing friendship moments, memorable characters, and action-packed routes. While the Majikoi sequels focus less on friendship, they introduce many memorable warrior waifu heroines while maintaining the goofy humor. Sujiro-san no Junai Road takes a similar approach to Majikoi, but on a less over-the-top level. It features delinquent heroines and surprisingly rich world building with various groups fighting for dominance. Even with some serious moments and a flawed protagonist, it's still a hilarious visual novel that I thoroughly enjoyed. Finally, Destiny Star Girlfriend is a rare case of a magical girl series as a lighthearted rom-com. Most magical girl-themed visual novels tend to be darker. Thankfully, DSG specializes in humor similar to Majikoi and Sujiro while offering surprisingly decent romance across its 4 entries, each roughly 6 to 7 hours long. This doesn't even cover the many untranslated titles I'd love to see translated or maybe even read in Japanese like Kimiaru, Wagahime, Wakasama no Zarasuru Sekai, and the Sujiro fan discs. Overall, Minato and Mirai, all the visual novel developers under Hawkeye, are consistently some of my favorites for mixing over-the-top humor with memorable characters, romance, surprising world building, and even occasional emotional scenes. I only ranked them at number 2 to avoid seeming like I'm cheating for the number 1 spot, but even these combined companies have trouble beating. Finally, at number 1, I have PULLTOP. While I wasn't a fan of the little I've tried of Happy Mayor and only somewhat liked Chrono Clock, everything else released by PULLTOP after those has become some of my all-time favorite visual novels ever. Their unique art style developed by COQ has grown on me a lot, becoming synonymous with PULLTOP's brand, though they've been experimenting with other artists recently. In terms of plot and character development, PULLTOP excels at things I personally value in a story-based visual novel. Amatsutsume was the first title I really loved from them. It's probably their overall best VN and the easiest to recommend. It features memorable Nakige drama and unique powers like the Kododama, allowing characters to influence others with words. The emotional depth, build-up, and plot twists are amazing. Aoi Tori is a little bit weirder and less deep, but still very enjoyable, front-loading its memorable Nakige-like drama before transitioning to lighter Moege-style banter. Despite some sexual themes that require some suspension of disbelief, it offers plenty of plot twists and surprisingly deep character development, especially in its wild true route, which is the closest I've seen to a horror Nakige visual novel. Their latest titles, Kunado Chronicles and Criminal Border, are also vastly underrated. Kunado Chronicles features fascinating world building and enjoyable side routes, especially around one of the few tsundere heroines I like a lot, Yuri. Meanwhile, Criminal Border stands out as my favorite episodic visual novel to date. It breaks the mold with a fresh writer and artist, showcasing that PULLTOP's engaging storytelling does not require fantasy elements. The psychological thriller aspects, fighting a mafia over a unique digital drug that causes intense horniness for those who watch it, properly integrate typical eroge H scenes into the plot, at least in my opinion. Criminal Border has what I consider the best paced, story-heavy visual novel to date, despite its episodic nature, with each episode focusing on a main heroine while keeping everything cohesive in a remarkably well-done manner. PULLTOP is also one of the few companies on this list still actively releasing and announcing titles. Moon Ghost, a shorter VN by writer Mikage, who worked on Amatsutsume, Aoi Tori, and Kunado, seems quite interesting, and I'd be very surprised if it does not get a Shirabune translation eventually. That said, Lip Lipples and Ijimeko ni Okasareru does not interest me nearly as much. PULLTOP isn't perfect. They go a bit too hard on long and numerous H scenes, some heroines are not particularly likable or more underdeveloped than I'd like, and as mentioned, I'm hit or miss on titles released before Amatsutsume. But PULLTOP is like the ultimate jack of all trades for what I personally look for in visual novels. The ability to create memorable characters, strong emotional cores with compelling heroine routes, extremely memorable true route stories, surprisingly good and well-paced unique character banter and humor, and unique settings in almost all their games. By staying distinct and not reusing any exact theme, route structure, or writer, PULLTOP earns its place as my number 1 favorite visual novel developer. And that covers my favorite top 10 visual novel developers. What were your thoughts on the ones that I chose, and what are your favorite visual novel developers? Feel free to leave a comment below.